I spent years cooking meals, paying bills, and keeping my family together inside the home my late husband and I built from nothing. Then one night, my son celebrated his biggest promotion with everyone he loved at the most expensive restaurant in Savannah, everyone except me. While they toasted his success, I sat alone in my own kitchen staring at a plastic container with my name written across it like leftovers nobody wanted. That was the moment I realized I was no longer a mother in that house. I was only useful. And before the night was over, I made a decision that would destroy the life my family thought they controlled forever. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're tuning in from. We love seeing how our stories connect people from all around the world. Your comments and thoughts bring this community to life, and we're so grateful to have you on this journey with us. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, grab a cozy seat, maybe a cup of coffee or tea, and prepare yourself for a tale that will captivate your heart from beginning to end. Let's begin. My name is Helen Whitmore, and I am 67 years old. Every morning, I wake before the sun rises over Savannah, Georgia, long before the rest of the house remembers I exist. The old hardwood floors still creak beneath my slippers, the same way they did 35 years ago, when my husband Daniel carried our baby son through these hallways after midnight because Ryan could never sleep during thunderstorms. Back then, this house felt alive. Now it felt carefully decorated, polished, and emotionally hollow, like a beautiful hotel lobby where nobody planned to stay very long. I moved quietly through the kitchen, tying my faded blue robe tighter around my waist while the coffee brewed. Outside the windows, Spanish moss swayed gently in the humid spring air. Savannah mornings always carried a softness to them, something slow and nostalgic that reminded me of fresh cinnamon rolls cooling in the bakery I used to own downtown. For 30 years, Whitmore Bakery had been part of this city. People lined up before sunrise for pecan sticky buns and peach muffins. Daniel used to stand behind the counter stealing cookie dough while pretending to help me close. Those memories still lived inside me more vividly than anything happening in my life now. I packed Emma's lunch before anyone else woke up. Turkey sandwich, apple slices, a handwritten napkin note with a tiny heart beside her name. She was 12 years old now, but she still smiled whenever she found them. Afterward, I wiped the counters, unloaded the dishwasher, and folded the dish towels exactly the way Vanessa preferred. Tight corners, no wrinkles. A few months earlier, she had quietly unfolded every towel I touched and redid them herself while talking on the phone to one of her friends. She never criticized me directly anymore. Somehow, that made it worse. By 7 o'clock, Vanessa entered the kitchen already dressed for the day, in cream slacks and gold jewelry that caught the morning light. She barely glanced at me before opening the refrigerator. "The almond milk goes on the second shelf," she said calmly. "It keeps the kitchen looking organized." I apologized automatically, even though I had bought the milk myself. Ryan came downstairs minutes later, adjusting his tie while staring at emails on his phone. He kissed Vanessa quickly, grabbed the breakfast I made, and gave me a distracted smile that disappeared almost immediately. When Ryan was little, he used to sit on the kitchen counter while I baked pies and tell everyone his mother made magic for a living. Sometimes, I still searched for traces of that little boy inside the exhausted man rushing past me every morning. Emma wandered in last, sleepy-haired and warm-hearted. She hugged me around the waist before sitting down. That small gesture carried me through entire days sometimes. After they left, silence settled over the house again. I walked slowly through the living room and noticed another framed photo missing from the fireplace mantel. A picture of Daniel and me dancing at our anniversary party had been replaced with a white ceramic vase Vanessa bought online. Little by little, evidence of my life had disappeared from these rooms. That afternoon, while dusting shelves nobody else noticed, I overheard Vanessa speaking to Ryan in the dining room about someday upgrading this house completely. Her voice sounded casual, confident, like ownership was already decided. Ryan said nothing. Late that night, after everyone had gone upstairs, I sat alone at the kitchen table holding one of Daniel's old recipe cards between my fingers. His handwriting curved gently across the stained paper. For the first time, I quietly wondered when I had stopped feeling like this home belonged to me at all. The entire house seemed to vibrate with excitement that week. Ryan stayed up later than usual answering emails, pacing through the dining room with restless energy, while Vanessa floated around him like someone preparing for a political campaign instead of a promotion announcement. New dresses arrived almost daily. Expensive shoes appeared near the staircase, still wrapped in tissue paper. Vanessa spent hours making dinner reservations, calling relatives, and discussing seating arrangements at restaurants I could never afford on my own retirement income. Meanwhile, I quietly kept the house running beneath all their excitement. I ironed Ryan's white dress shirts because Vanessa claimed dry cleaners ruined the collars. I picked Emma up after school 3 afternoons in a row because both her parents were too busy. I cooked dinners nobody complimented and cleaned dishes nobody noticed. The strange thing was that I did not even resent it at first. Part of me genuinely felt proud of Ryan. I remembered every achievement that had once mattered in our family. Soccer trophies lined across the fireplace mantel. School concerts where Ryan searched the audience until he spotted me smiling at him. When he graduated college, he hugged me so tightly outside the auditorium that my corsage nearly broke apart against his suit jacket. "You came," he whispered back then, almost emotional with relief, as though there had ever been a chance I would miss it. On Thursday evening, Ryan burst through the front door with a grin I had not seen in years. For a brief second, he looked like my son again, instead of the permanently exhausted stranger who moved through this house. "I got it," he announced breathlessly. "Chief Financial Officer." The words filled the room with celebration. Vanessa immediately squealed and wrapped her arms around him, while Emma clapped excitedly from the staircase. I felt genuine tears sting my eyes. Daniel would have been so proud of him. I stood there smiling while my mind instantly drifted towards small details. Maybe I could wear the navy dress hanging untouched in my closet since church last Easter. Maybe I should curl my hair properly for once. I even thought about writing Ryan a card the way I used to whenever something important happened in his life. Then Vanessa looked directly at me, not cruelly at first, almost carefully. "Oh, Helen," she said softly, while adjusting one of her bracelets, "I probably should explain dinner tonight." Something cold settled quietly into my stomach. She continued speaking in that polished social voice she used around people she secretly disliked. The restaurant reservation was apparently small and professional, mostly executives, close relatives, and people connected to Ryan's career path. She mentioned networking several times, as though repeating the word might soften the humiliation. Ryan kept staring at his phone beside her. Emma looked confused. "Grandma is family," she said gently. Nobody answered her. Vanessa eventually opened the refrigerator and pointed toward a plastic container resting beside the orange juice. "I left you that salad from yesterday," she said. "Lighter meals are usually easier at your age." I nodded because I no longer trusted my voice. An hour later, they all left together dressed beautifully for a celebration I suddenly understood had never included me. Ryan paused near the front door as though he might say something meaningful, but Vanessa touched his arm lightly and he walked outside without looking back. The house became painfully quiet after the car disappeared. Later that night, I opened the refrigerator and stared at the container waiting alone on the shelf. My name was written across the lid in black marker. Helen. Not Mom, not Grandma, just Helen. I sat alone in the dark kitchen for a long time, wondering something that frightened me more than loneliness itself. If my absence changed nothing for them, maybe one day I should disappear completely. I did not sleep after Ryan's promotion dinner. The house stayed painfully quiet long after midnight, but my mind kept replaying small moments I had ignored for years. Vanessa's hand resting possessively on Ryan's arm, the way my son avoided my eyes before leaving for dinner, my name written across that plastic container in black marker, like a label placed on forgotten leftovers. Around 2 a.m, I wandered through the dark house barefoot, touching walls that once carried warmth instead of tension. Every room still held traces of Daniel in ways Vanessa could never fully erase. The hallway where he measured Ryan's height in pencil marks. The dining room where we hosted Christmas dinners loud enough for neighbors to hear laughter from outside. The back porch where he drank coffee every Sunday while reading newspapers from beginning to end. After Daniel died, grief hollowed me out so completely that I mistook dependency for closeness. When Ryan suggested moving back home temporarily with Vanessa and Emma, I welcomed the idea almost desperately. I thought noise inside the house might soften the silence Daniel left behind. At first, everything felt manageable. Ryan promised it would only last a few months while they saved money. Vanessa brought flowers during the first week and insisted on helping organize closets. Emma filled empty rooms with life again. I convinced myself we were healing together as a family. But little changes accumulated quietly over time. Vanessa began making decisions without asking me first. Furniture disappeared and returned replaced with modern pieces that looked expensive, but strangely cold. Holiday traditions faded because Vanessa preferred restaurant brunches over homemade meals. Friends stopped visiting after she repeatedly criticized my old-fashioned entertaining style in front of guests with polished little laughs attached to every insult. Eventually, I stopped inviting anyone at all. I spent more time inside the kitchen and my bedroom than anywhere else in the house. Even the living room no longer felt like mine after Vanessa started telling guests where everyone should sit during parties. Somehow, there was never space reserved for me. Still, I kept excusing everything. Ryan worked long hours. Vanessa was ambitious. Young marriages were stressful. Families went through difficult seasons. I repeated those explanations so often they became emotional wallpaper covering every crack in my life. Meanwhile, I quietly paid increasing utility bills without mentioning it. I covered Emma's private school tuition one semester when Ryan's investment account suffered losses. I even withdrew retirement savings to help Ryan recover after a failed business venture Vanessa encouraged him to join. I thought I was supporting family. Then one afternoon, about 3 days after the promotion dinner, I overheard Vanessa speaking on the phone in the dining room while I folded laundry nearby. Her voice carried casually through the hallway. Once we fully upgrade this property, the value will double. Property, not home. Something inside me shifted uneasily. Later that evening, I noticed paperwork spread across the dining room table after everyone went upstairs. Mortgage documents, refinancing estimates, home equity projections. At first, I assumed Ryan was researching investments connected to work. Then I saw my own name. My hands began shaking before I fully understood why. One document contained a rough signature attempt beside mine. Not exact, not complete, but unmistakably practiced. Helen Whitmore, repeated several times in the slightly different handwriting. Ryan walked downstairs moments later and froze when he saw the papers in my hands. Instead of guilt, defensiveness crossed his face first. He immediately started explaining financial pressure and long-term security while avoiding direct eye contact. Vanessa appeared behind him, calm as ever, smoothly reframing everything as responsible planning for the family's future. That was the moment I finally understood something devastating. This was no longer simple disrespect. My own son had started seeing my life as an asset to leverage. Late that night, I sat alone on my bed holding those refinancing papers while staring at my wedding photograph with Daniel. For the first time in years, grief no longer felt like the heaviest thing inside me. Betrayal did. The strangest part after discovering the refinancing papers was how normal Ryan and Vanessa acted afterward. For several days, nobody mentioned the documents again. Vanessa continued discussing restaurant reservations and furniture catalogs over breakfast, while Ryan disappeared into work calls and late meetings as though nothing important had happened at all. Their silence told me more than any apology could have. They were not ashamed of what they almost did. They were only afraid I might stop cooperating. I began noticing things differently after that. Small details that once blended into daily routine suddenly felt impossible to ignore. Most evenings, I ate dinner alone at the kitchen counter, while Ryan and Vanessa carried plates upstairs to watch television in their bedroom. The dining room had become decorative rather than personal, another polished space inside a house that no longer felt emotionally livable. For years, grief had kept me numb enough to accept loneliness as normal. After Daniel died, I became so terrified of empty rooms that I tolerated almost anything to avoid being abandoned again. That realization settled painfully inside me during those quiet days. One Thursday morning, while Vanessa attended a charity luncheon and Ryan was downtown for meetings, I drove across Savannah to meet an attorney named Claire Dawson. The moment she walked into her office lobby, I recognized her immediately. Claire used to visit Whitmore Bakery every Friday for cinnamon coffee cake before court hearings years ago. Time had silvered her hair and softened her posture slightly, but her eyes remained sharp and deeply observant. She listened carefully while reviewing every document I brought. Mortgage estimates, home equity paperwork, the pages containing failed attempts at my signature. Claire remained calm throughout the meeting, though something in her expression darkened as she turned each page. She explained that the house legally belonged entirely to me, and that no refinancing process could move forward without direct authorization. The signature imitation alone carried serious implications if I chose to pursue legal action. Instead of relief, I initially felt embarrassed, ashamed that I allowed my own family to reduce me into someone frightened inside her own home. Claire spoke gently but directly. She asked me a question nobody had asked in years. What kind of life did I actually want now? The question followed me for days afterward. At first, I could not imagine leaving the house because too much of Daniel still lived there. Every corner carried traces of our marriage. The idea of selling it felt almost disloyal, like abandoning him somehow. But slowly, another truth emerged beneath the grief. Daniel would never have wanted me living like this. Over the following weeks, I began quietly reorganizing my life. Claire helped establish legal protections around my finances while I opened separate accounts Ryan could not access. I met with a real estate agent in a neighboring county where nobody knew my family. During those afternoons outside the house, I noticed something surprising. I felt peaceful. I drank coffee beside Savannah River, watching cargo ships drift through sunlight. I wandered through bookstores without rushing home to cook dinner for everyone else. Complete strangers treated me with more warmth than my own household had in years. Meanwhile, Vanessa became increasingly obsessed with renovating what she casually called our future home. One evening, I overheard her discussing plans to tear apart Daniel's study and expand the upstairs bedroom suite. She even mentioned selling several antique pieces that belonged to his parents. That conversation became the final fracture inside me. 2 weeks later, I sat alone inside my parked car after signing the house sale documents. For the first time in years, I cried openly. Not because I felt broken, because I finally understood I was choosing myself. 3 weeks after signing the sale documents, Ryan and Vanessa hosted another celebration dinner for his promotion. The house glowed with noise and expensive perfume that evening. Vanessa moved through the downstairs rooms in a silk dress the color of champagne, while checking catering trays and floral arrangements with nervous perfectionism. Ryan laughed louder than usual, energized by compliments from relatives and coworkers who kept calling him successful. Nobody noticed how quiet I had become. That morning, while the house prepared itself for celebration, I packed my entire life into 3 suitcases. I only took what still felt emotionally mine. Daniel's recipe card secured carefully inside a wooden tin, old photo albums with faded holiday pictures, Emma's crayon drawings from elementary school folded neatly between sweaters, a few pieces of clothing, my wedding ring, the blue ceramic pie dish Daniel once gave me on our anniversary because he said every baker deserved beautiful tools. Everything else stayed behind. The oversized sectional Vanessa insisted on buying, the decorative mirrors, the expensive dining chairs nobody actually used, all the polished upgrades that transformed my home into something elegant but emotionally unrecognizable. By afternoon, laughter echoed downstairs while I walked quietly from room to room, saying goodbye to memories instead of furniture. Ryan's old nursery still carried faint traces of baby powder beneath fresh paint. The staircase reminded me of Christmas mornings when Daniel pretended to photograph wrapping paper instead of gifts because he liked capturing excitement more than objects. Even the kitchen windows held memories of summer thunderstorms and flower-covered evenings at the bakery. For years, I thought those memories chained me to the house. Now I understood they would survive without it. The new owners officially received possession the next morning at 9 o'clock. Claire handled every legal detail quietly. Ryan and Vanessa remained completely unaware while discussing future renovations with guests downstairs. Near sunset, I sat alone at the kitchen table writing the final letter. My hands trembled occasionally, not from uncertainty but from accumulated grief finally finding somewhere to go. I wrote about loneliness first, about what it felt like becoming invisible inside my own home. Then I acknowledged the financial betrayal directly without cruelty or dramatic accusations. I explained that the house had legally sold and the new owners would arrive in the morning. I also included information about a small apartment Claire helped arrange temporarily nearby. Part of me hated leaving Ryan with consequences that harsh. Another part finally understood love without boundaries eventually destroys both people. Before sealing the envelope, I wrote one final sentence. I hope one day you understand why I had to save myself. Later, while guests laughed downstairs over wine glasses and desserts I had baked earlier that morning, I slipped quietly into Emma's bedroom. Moonlight rested softly across her blankets and schoolbooks. I left a handwritten note inside her desk drawer, telling her never to let anyone convince her kindness was weakness. Then I turned off the lights throughout the house one by one. The kitchen, the hallway, Daniel's study. Each darkened room felt less like abandonment and more like release. Just after midnight, I placed the house keys inside the mailbox for the realtor and carried my suitcases to the car. For several minutes, I sat silently behind the steering wheel, listening to Savannah cicadas humming through warm night air. When I finally drove away, I did not look back immediately. But somewhere near the edge of town, I glanced once into the rearview mirror and saw the porch light glowing faintly in the distance. For the first time in years, I realized something quietly life-changing. I was not running away from my life. I was finally reclaiming it. I drove through most of the night with both hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. Somewhere between Savannah and Charleston, exhaustion settled into my bones so heavily that I stopped twice for coffee simply to remain alert. I expected guilt to consume me before sunrise. I expected panic, regret, maybe even the urge to turn the car around. Instead, I felt strangely calm. Not happy yet. Happiness seemed too fragile and unfamiliar for that moment. But beneath the fear and sadness, something quiet inside me finally loosened after years of emotional tension. I reached Charleston just after dawn. The cottage Claire helped me purchase sat beneath enormous oak trees draped with pale moss, smaller than my old house, but warm in ways I had forgotten homes could feel. The porch faced a narrow street lined with flower boxes and bicycles instead of luxury cars and carefully managed appearances. As I carried my suitcases toward the front steps, an older woman watering plants nearby smiled at me gently. Her name was Martha Green. That morning she brought over banana bread still warm from the oven and welcomed me to the neighborhood without asking intrusive questions or treating me like a burden. The simple kindness nearly brought me to tears. Inside the cottage, silence felt different than it had in Savannah. Not lonely, peaceful. I opened every window without worrying whether someone would criticize the airflow or complain about humidity. I drank coffee slowly at my own kitchen table. Nobody needed breakfast from me. Nobody expected folded laundry or clean dishes waiting before sunrise. For the first time in years, I existed without serving someone else. Meanwhile, chaos exploded behind me. Ryan called 23 times during my first day in Charleston alone. Vanessa left increasingly angry voicemails accusing me of betrayal, cruelty, and emotional instability. I listened to none of them fully. Claire confirmed the legal transfer completed successfully that morning and advised me to maintain distance for now. 2 days later, Emma secretly messaged me online. At first, she only asked whether I was safe. Then she sent a link to Vanessa's social media page. Vanessa had posted dramatic photographs of herself crying beside moving boxes while describing how an elderly parent abandoned her family without warning. Hundreds of strangers responded with sympathy immediately. People called me heartless, ungrateful, vindictive. The accusations stung more than I expected. I almost doubted myself again until another message arrived from Emma later that evening. Attached were security camera clips recorded inside the Savannah house over several months. I watched Vanessa mocking my age while entertaining guests in the kitchen. I watched her laughing about eventually owning the property herself. Worst of all, I watched Ryan standing silently beside her over and over again. Emma admitted Vanessa planned the public victim narrative before she even finished reading my letter. A few days later, those clips somehow spread beyond the family after Emma shared them privately with one relative she trusted. Public sympathy reversed almost overnight. Vanessa's boutique page filled with criticism. Local gossip pages reposted the videos repeatedly. Ryan's company removed him temporarily from public financial presentations, while internal concerns circulated quietly. I did not feel triumphant watching any of it unfold. Mostly, I felt sad that Emma had witnessed so much ugliness at 12 years old. Ryan continued leaving desperate voicemails every night. His voice sounded smaller each time, confused beneath the panic and humiliation. Still, I remained silent. As sunset spread soft orange light across Charleston Harbor one evening, I sat quietly on my porch beside Martha's potted flowers and realized peace felt unfamiliar only because I had lived without it for far too long. By late autumn, Charleston no longer felt temporary. I had developed routines that belonged entirely to me. Every morning, I walked slowly through the quiet neighborhood while sea air drifted between old brick buildings and oak trees. I bought fresh bread from a small cafe near the harbor where the owner already remembered my usual order. Some afternoons, I worked in the tiny garden beside my porch planting rosemary and white daisies simply because I liked looking at them. The strangest part of healing was realizing peace often arrived through ordinary moments instead of dramatic transformations. Martha Green became part of that peace too. She invited me to church socials, outdoor concerts, and community dinners without ever pressuring me to explain my past. Through her, I began volunteering twice a week at a women's center, teaching basic baking classes for widows and retired women looking for companionship. For the first time in years, I felt useful without feeling used. Meanwhile, Ryan's life continued unraveling back in Savannah. Through scattered conversations with Emma and occasional updates from Claire, I learned the fallout from the leaked videos damaged far more than Vanessa's online reputation. Ryan's company quietly removed him from several major accounts after clients began questioning his judgment and personal stability. Financial pressure mounted quickly once public sympathy disappeared. Vanessa apparently blamed Ryan for everything. She accused him of failing to control the situation, failing to protect their image, and failing to stop me from leaving in the first place. According to Emma, the arguments became constant after the scandal spread online. Then one morning in November, Emma called me crying softly. Vanessa had left. She moved back to her parents' house after her boutique collapsed financially, leaving Ryan alone in the apartment Claire arranged months earlier. Emma divided her time awkwardly between households, while Ryan struggled to manage basic responsibilities he once barely noticed existed. I pictured him standing inside that small apartment with unpaid bills spread across the counter, laundry piling near the bedroom, and grocery lists calculated carefully around shrinking bank accounts. For the first time in his adult life, Ryan experienced the invisible labor someone else had quietly carried for him every single day. Part of me felt sorrow for him despite everything. Another part remembered the loneliness of eating dinners alone in my own house while he ignored what was happening. One evening, Emma revealed something that unsettled me deeply. She admitted Ryan sometimes argued privately with Vanessa about the way she treated me. Not often, not strongly enough, but enough for Vanessa to threaten divorce repeatedly whenever he pushed back. She also used Emma as leverage, warning Ryan that conflict would destroy their family and embarrass him professionally. Hearing that did not erase my pain, but it complicated it. Ryan had not been entirely cruel. He had been weak, fearful, emotionally dependent in ways I never fully understood while living inside the situation myself. A week later, I received his first handwritten letter. There was no request for money, no excuses, no manipulation. He described specific failures honestly, acknowledging moments he should have protected me and chose silence instead. The words felt painfully sincere. I read the letter 3 times sitting quietly at my kitchen table. Then I folded it carefully and placed it inside the drawer beside Daniel's recipe cards. Some wounds healed slowly because they deserved truth, not speed. Spring arrived quietly in Charleston. One morning, I stepped onto my porch and realized the jasmine vines near the fence had started blooming overnight. Their scent drifted through the warm coastal air, while sunlight spilled across the garden boxes Martha helped me build during winter. Small white flowers opened slowly beside the rosemary plants I nearly killed twice before finally learning how much water they needed. For the first time in years, my life no longer revolved around surviving emotional tension. It revolved around living. The baking classes at the Women's Center expanded faster than anyone expected. What began as 6 lonely widows learning pie crust techniques slowly turned into crowded Thursday afternoons, filled with laughter, flour-covered counters, and stories shared over fresh coffee. Some women came because they missed companionship. Others admitted they simply needed somewhere they felt visible again. I understood that feeling deeply. Martha continued encouraging me toward experiences I once convinced myself were unnecessary. Together, we attended small art festivals, church picnics, and even a weekend coastal trip with several women from the community center. Standing barefoot beside the Atlantic Ocean one afternoon, I realized how many years I spent emotionally shrinking myself inside my own life. I had forgotten freedom could feel peaceful instead of selfish. Meanwhile, Ryan kept writing. Every 2 or 3 weeks, another handwritten envelope arrived inside my mailbox. His letters remained painfully honest in ways our conversations never had while living together. He admitted cowardice repeatedly, not dramatic self-hatred, but genuine recognition that he allowed comfort and fear to replace character. In one letter, he wrote that I spent years protecting everyone around me while nobody protected me in return. That sentence stayed with me for days. Eventually, I started replying occasionally. Short notes at first, simple acknowledgments, updates about Charleston weather, or Emma's school progress after she visited during spring break. Nothing emotional, nothing forgiving yet. But the silence between us had softened. Emma's visit changed something inside me too. We spent afternoons baking peach cobbler together while music played softly through the kitchen windows. She walked beside me along the harbor one evening and admitted Ryan barely resembled the man he used to be before everything collapsed. According to her, the apartment, financial pressure, and loneliness humbled him more than public humiliation ever could. What struck me most was how much Emma herself matured. She no longer spoke like a frightened child trying to keep peace between adults. There was sadness inside her now, but also clarity. After she returned to Savannah, I found myself thinking often about Daniel. My husband believed forgiveness meant very little without accountability. He also believed people deserved second chances only after they truly understood the damage they caused. For months, I treated distance as protection, but eventually another uncomfortable thought emerged beneath my healing. If I held on to pain forever, would it become another kind of prison? Several weeks later, Ryan sent another letter. This time he wrote that he did not expect forgiveness or reconciliation. He only hoped someday he might become someone worthy of trust again. I cried quietly after reading that sentence, not because everything was repaired, because for the first time he finally understood trust was earned slowly through humility rather than demanded through guilt. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table for nearly 2 hours, writing him a longer response. I described the loneliness he never noticed, the humiliation I buried for years, the boundaries I still needed moving forward, but I also admitted something else. I was no longer angry every single day. As sunset colored Charleston sky in pale gold and lavender, I walked to the mailbox and slipped the envelope inside. Healing did not erase memory. It simply allowed life to grow larger than pain. 2 years after leaving Savannah, Charleston finally felt less like an escape and more like the life I was always supposed to have. By early autumn, my routines carried the steady comfort of belonging. Thursday baking classes at the Women's Center became so popular that people waited weeks for open spots. Martha practically lived on my porch most evenings with tea and neighborhood gossip. The small cottage once purchased in fear now felt deeply rooted with friendship, peace, and ordinary happiness. Most surprising of all, I no longer woke each morning carrying dread inside my chest. Ryan remained part of my life only through letters during those 2 years. Consistent letters, honest ones. He never asked for money again, never pressured me emotionally, never blamed Vanessa or circumstances for what happened. Slowly, through repetition instead of dramatic promises, he became someone more emotionally grounded than the man who once stood silently beside his wife's cruelty. Emma often updated me too. Ryan found stable work with a smaller financial consulting company outside Savannah. Nothing glamorous, no luxury lifestyle, just steady work and shared custody routines centered around Emma rather than appearances. According to her, he cooked dinner badly but consistently and learned how to survive inside ordinary adulthood without expecting someone else to absorb every burden for him. Then one September afternoon, another letter arrived. This time, Ryan asked if I would consider meeting him in person while he visited Charleston for work. The request contained no guilt, no emotional urgency, only respectful hope. I stared at the letter for nearly 3 weeks before finally agreeing. We met at a quiet waterfront cafe on a cloudy Saturday afternoon. When Ryan walked through the entrance, I barely recognized him at first. He looked older than 40, softer somehow. The expensive confidence he once wore like armor had disappeared completely. For the first time in years, he resembled Daniel a little. Not physically, emotionally. There was humility in the way he carried himself now. The conversation began awkwardly. Years of pain sat heavily between us, impossible to ignore. But Ryan did something he had never truly done before. He took full responsibility. He did not blame Vanessa. He did not describe himself as manipulated or confused. Instead, he admitted he became so afraid of conflict that he allowed silence to replace character. He confessed that losing me forced him to confront how emotionally weak he had become during his marriage. Listening to him hurt more than I expected. Not because I doubted him anymore, but because part of me mourned how much suffering it took for both of us to reach this moment. I admitted something difficult, too. Some trust might never fully return. Certain memories still lived inside me sharply enough to ache. I could forgive him without pretending the damage never existed. Ryan accepted that quietly. We talked about Daniel for a while after that, about old fishing trips and bakery mornings and the ridiculous Christmas sweater Daniel wore every December simply to embarrass everyone in public photographs. For a brief moment, the conversation felt natural again, instead of painful. Before leaving, Ryan hesitated beside the cafe entrance and asked whether he might visit Charleston again sometime. I did not make promises, but I also did not close the door anymore. After he walked away, I remained near the window, watching gray waves roll softly across the harbor. Sadness still existed inside me. So did peace. And somewhere beneath both emotions, cautious hope finally began making room for itself too. By the time winter settled over Charleston, my cottage no longer felt like a place I escaped to. It felt like home. The kitchen smelled constantly of cinnamon, vanilla, and fresh bread again, because my baking classes had grown into something much larger than I ever expected. Women from across the neighborhood gathered every Thursday afternoon, carrying old family recipes and stories they had not shared in years. Laughter returned naturally to my life instead of feeling borrowed from someone else's happiness. Emma visited often now. She usually arrived carrying too many books and not enough warm clothes, immediately filling the cottage with energy the moment she stepped inside. Some weekends, Ryan drove her down from Savannah and stayed only briefly. He never behaved as though he belonged automatically in my life anymore. That difference mattered more than apologies ever could. Real change revealed itself quietly. Ryan washed dishes after dinner without being asked. He brought flowers for Martha when he visited because he remembered she liked yellow tulips. He listened more than he spoke. The entitled man who once allowed me to disappear inside my own home no longer existed in the same way. Healing, I learned, did not always arrive dramatically. Sometimes it appeared through small, consistent acts repeated over time. One cold Saturday evening, Emma and I stood side by side rolling pie dough across the kitchen counter while rain tapped softly against the windows. Flour covered her sweater sleeves, and she laughed every time the dough stuck unevenly beneath the rolling pin. Watching her there reminded me painfully and beautifully of the bakery years with Daniel. At one point, Emma looked up at me quietly and asked whether I regretted leaving Savannah. The question settled deeply inside me. For a long moment, I listened to the rain and thought about everything those years inside that house had taken from me. My confidence, my voice, my sense of worth. After Daniel died, I confused being needed with being loved. I accepted emotional neglect because I feared loneliness more than unhappiness. Now I finally understood the difference. Helping people you love should never require erasing yourself completely. I told Emma the truth gently. I did not regret leaving. I only regretted waiting so long to choose myself. Later that night, after Ryan and Emma drove back to Savannah, I sat alone on my porch, wrapped in a thick blanket while cold ocean air drifted through the dark streets. Somewhere nearby, church bells echoed faintly across the harbor. I still missed Daniel every day. I still carried scars from everything that happened with Ryan and Vanessa, but grief no longer controlled my life, and pain no longer defined my identity. Some relationships survive only after truth destroys the illusion holding them together. As I watched the final colors of sunset disappear behind Charleston rooftops, I realized something that felt both heartbreakingly simple and completely freeing. Home was never the place where I sacrificed myself to keep others comfortable. Home was the place where I was finally allowed to exist honestly, peacefully, and fully as myself. Sometimes the hardest lesson in life is realizing that love should never require the loss of dignity. Many people spend years giving everything they have to others while slowly forgetting their own worth. But there comes a moment when silence becomes too heavy, loneliness becomes too familiar, and the heart finally understands that peace is more valuable than approval. True healing does not begin when the pain disappears. It begins when someone chooses to stop living only for the comfort of others and finally starts living honestly for themselves. Some relationships survive after truth is revealed, while others fade away. But either way, self-respect must remain. In the end, home is not simply a place filled with people. It is the place where a soul feels safe, valued, and free to exist without fear. Thank you for staying until the end of this story. If this journey touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments below, and do not forget to like, subscribe, and follow the channel for more emotional stories like this.